Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Ashley Elsner, and she's coming to us from the other coast because we start our programming here on the East Coast. She's on the West Coast, but her journey to the West Coast is very interesting. It's a great story. And she has a new company that she's bringing to market that I am fascinated by because even in the elevator pitch alone, I understand that Artery Pay is a Venmo for cannabis. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show and tell us about Artery Pay and how you came up with this idea.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for having me on In the Weeds. You know, honestly, it's such a great show. I really appreciate what you're doing over on the East Coast in order to spread the word about cannabis and the cannabis industry and actually the professionalism that people are trying to bring to the industry, as well as, really wonderful medicine for people who are, really need it. So Artery Pay is exactly what you said. It's Venmo for cannabis. So it's completely legal payment processing that is done via ACH, so no card processing. You just frankly link your bank account just like you would with any digital wallet, and you're good to go, and you can pay for cannabis right there. Yeah,
you said the word legal, so I'm going to actually give you another kudo here because you are you graduated law school, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I got my JD MBA from Northwestern Law and Kellogg School of Management. Those are out in Chicago and Evanston. Shout out to my Wildcats.
I'm friendly. I like Northwestern. I have dear friends there, and in fact, one of my I don't want to call him a protege, but certainly someone who's a friend of the family, someone who came through my on-camera training, won a college Emmy Award from Northwestern University, and is now
an amazing journalism program. They're absolutely wonderful.
Yes, they do. And now he's in Hollywood looking to create his own show, and we might even be airing it. But that's another story. But you also did some undergrad work and got an undergrad degree from some school in Connecticut that is kind of like Harvard, but it's not, right?
That's right. That's right. I am a Yaley. I'm an Eli. I'm Bulldog Woof Woof.
And I mean, you've had a ton of schooling, so obviously you have a pretty good background on what it takes to actually bring a product to market and a service to market in this particular case, and also a product. But as you know, in the cannabis industry, there's all sorts of regulations. And you mentioned that you must have gone through a legal discovery process on how best to do this. Yes?
That's right. So actually, my background is financial law and financial institution operations. I started with Sidley Austin doing financial regulatory work. That was actually right out of Yale. And then I was at Bessemer Venture Partners doing legal and operations. One of my co-founders has decided to join me now. This is Keanu. This is corporate culture.
I understand. And we understand the importance of having camaraderie and a pet camaraderie during this difficult time when everybody's meeting on Zoom and doing business on Zoom. And, it's a total virtual normal that we're getting used to now, I guess, right?
Yeah, he loves to bomb my interviews. Actually, it was very funny. I was on the phone with a potential investor last night, and their kids started jumping on the couch behind them. And they, of course, quickly, turned it off. And I was actually sitting there giggling because it's kind of refreshing and nice to see people in their own element and in a more personal space rather than, professional. We keep everything professional. We're very, very, of course, we're engaged with one another, but it's very matter of fact, very to the point, and you don't necessarily see people's humanity. And I actually kind of have enjoyed some of the Zoom conferencing as a result of that, because you get to see people's humanity come out.
Well, there you go. And just for the record, for our audience, our first meeting was not on Zoom. It was actually the old-fashioned way on a phone call, right?
Old-fashioned phone call, good old-fashioned high touch.
And we met through our mutual friends from the Emerald Media Group too, and I want to give them a big shout out too.
Tina and Jill, yeah, wonderful ladies.
They do a great job, and we're about to take their productions to a whole new level, and I think they're very excited about the partnership that we're forming. But let's go back to the product. Let's go back to fighting that stigma that is out there and all the legalese that you had to uncover and discover in order to create this great Venmo for cannabis.
Mhm. So my background really being financial law, financial regulation, really being very comfortable with the state-based approach to regulation, and that really being where I kind of cut my teeth, was in state-based financial law. That being where I cut my teeth, like this was actually not very complicated for me. So when I looked through the legislation, realistically, you can provide legal banking, legal financial products to this space, but it's very complicated because fintech, when it comes down to it, is technology-enabled finance. It is finance. It is not tech. There are rules, there are regulations that are in place, and you have to follow them in order to actually be able to provide the services that you want. And when you start talking with banks about these things, they have a longer discovery. When you're asking them to do a new product, they have to go through a pretty substantial risk management exercise in seeing how it is that they're going to be able to do that and see whether it's actually operationally possible based on their current capabilities to be able to support this space. And one of the things that we actually found was that on the compliance side, while it's perfectly legal to provide it in a certain way, to provide products in a certain way, you can't cross state lines. You have to be really careful about the onboarding process because you have to do enhanced due diligence on all of the businesses and all of the customers. And then when you get to the actual transactions, there's additional financial reporting that's required. So when you start talking about regulations with FinCEN, as well as Cole Memo, which while rescinded by the Department of Justice, has continued to give a framework for what banks view as important criteria for making sure that their operations are run legitimately. And it's a pretty good framework, actually, if you start thinking about it. So, but the other thing about it is you have to report every single transaction to FinCEN as a suspicious activity. And that's a huge overload on a compliance team that is doing most of these processes on a manual basis. And so we actually went ahead and built a lot of that into our transaction system so that you have the compliance side and the transaction unified. And so when we were taking these to banks to actually talk with them about our process, they not only loved the wallet and loved that we were showing proof that we were in fact doing things legitimately, which, fintech has gotten a pretty bad reputation since, all of the initial coin offering, illegal securities behavior, people running off with other people's money and pretending like they were actually raising funds when really they were just kind of fraudsters, cooking up books that happened with Wirecard. I mean, like there's been a whole lot of mess that's come through the fintech community, and rightfully so. Banks are concerned about that liability in addition to like how do you manage the risk of these fintechers in addition to the risk of cannabis. And so we were able to actually prove that process out, show them like we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And actually, when they saw that product, they were like, "Can we have that?" So it's true that we've been called Verifin on steroids in our back office, but frankly, that was really just built for me so that I could effectively, efficiently, and at scale be able to manage our compliance obligations for running a completely compliant cannabis banking/payments program. We don't specifically do the banking. We actually would prefer for people to have their own bank. It's better for them because you should always know where your funds are custodied. But with the way that we have set this up, we are following money transmitter law. So in all the states where we're required to have our money transmitter laws, we're going to have them before we do operations because that's how we do. And then with respect to our team, we're actually financial professionals for the most part. We all have very personal cannabis stories. Mine is very personal. I am a cannabis patient. That's actually how I got into the cannabis industry, is I saw all of the crazy things that were going on in financial space for the cannabis industry and was genuinely concerned that it was going to derail the legalization process. Because frankly, you have protection at the state level for your cannabis business, yes, but you don't have protection if it turns out that your financial providers were either money laundering or committing financial fraud or bank fraud or different types of, frankly, financial fraud in order to access a system that they have not gotten clearance from the gatekeepers of that system, from the folks who own it, that they're willing to work with cannabis and take on that risk. So we have been completely upfront We have been completely transparent. Our financial relationships, actually, we're transparent about those as well. We have a public partnership with Radius Bank, a nice Massachusetts institution that's very fintech forward, very smart people. We're very excited about that. And we're able to provide our services really with a federally chartered financial institution backing our product, providing the processing services and providing the custody of those assets. So you know where your funds are.
Right. And that's fantastic. And of course, in this day and age, everything's done, everybody walks around with this little handheld computer and connects with the world. And that's what we all do, right? It's how it works.
It's easy. It makes your life so much easier. And this is also contactless in a space where actually your cards really aren't.
Right.
I mean, when you're going in and you're pressing buttons on these things, or you're like, how dirty do those ATMs look? How dirty do the processing equipment for card processing look? It's just they've always been gross, frankly.
Well, we've all become a country of germaphobes, and for a reason, and we all understand that reason. But there are some certain extents that many of us go to. And yes, I wash my hands pretty much every time I use my ATM card or any other card. Yeah. And I also pump gas with a glove on for the first time in my life too. And actually, I really appreciate that, because I hated the smell when you got the gas on your fingers and all that. It was just, I don't need to go there. You mentioned something.
Keanu decided he had to come back and make another cameo.
Well, as long as Keanu doesn't, have to go out or anything in the middle of the interview, I'm comfortable with that. And
he wants to talk to you, Jimmy. He's excited to meet you.
Well, I'm no Dr. Doolittle, but I do have that ability to chat with other animals. And I certainly, as a talk show host, by the way, I pretty much talk to anybody, including Keanu. Oh, you're so cute. Does Keanu speak? We don't need him. I was going to say that's fine too.
He's the strong silent type.
I wouldn't be familiar with that one. Let's just say I'm the weak, loud type, and I like to run. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about something you mentioned. You mentioned the Cole memo, and I'm very familiar with the Cole memo because I literally just wrote a blog about the challenges in the cannabis space, in the social media space, because we too have been subject to censorship by Facebook and by YouTube for 2 pieces of content that we've put out there. And actually everybody keeps telling me, only 2? You're doing pretty well, right? Sure. But it was the fact that Cole memo got rescinded and gave Jeff Sessions, like, hey, we're going to take down those local cannabis companies in those legal states, kind of showing his federal, whatever it was, moxie, whatever you want to call it. There's a few other things I could call it, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. But the bottom line is it freaked a lot of businesses out that were taking money from the cannabis space. And it was specifically the banking. And it was no coincidence that YouTube, 4 months after that memo was released or rescinded, if you will, YouTube took down all the money-making cannabis programming and content that they had. They were afraid of it. They took it all down. No notice. And by the way, it happened to coincide with the first podcast that I was looking to put out onto YouTube, and I was told not to, so I did it. But it is an amazing thing to me to hear about. Artificial intelligence is making decisions on content based on certain words. And, and those words aren't alcohol or opioids. They are cannabis and marijuana. And I mean, that's a plant, isn't it? And this is the thing that freaks me out about this whole thing. It's still scheduled as a Schedule 1 as a drug. It's treated as a drug because that's what for 80 years of propaganda, everybody told you it was. It's a medicinal plant more than anything else, and it's been around longer than any of our laws. And this is the facts that are coming to the surface now. And while you have an anecdotal story, and I'm going to ask you about that to tell us your cannabis story in a minute, it still bugs me as someone who is trying to do the right thing and educate the public about this plant and look at the various science and research that is now supporting this green wave that continues to move. It's frustrating, though. It really is. We're still at the very beginning. So we really do have this obligation of telling the stories of those that are in the cannabis industry. And that's why I started this company. And that's why I enjoy meeting people like yourself and others similarly minded people who understand. And I also see in this industry, everybody is very passionate about this cause. And I think that does go to your reasons. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you and how you ended up using cannabis instead of, I'm going to guess, painkillers.
Well, yes, that's true. So I have a condition called complex regional pain syndrome type 2. It is a very, very nasty neuropathic type of pain. It is peripherally located for me. It's in my left leg. It is as a result of an injury that I sustained when I was 23. I ended up with compartment syndrome. I nearly died. It was a very long road to hoe, and it both disabled me in my left leg, gave me substantial weakness. I had a lot of muscle death in my lower leg. I had to have a host of surgeries to be able to walk again. I am incredibly grateful for where I am now, and it's true that cannabis changed my life. I had been living with this condition and barely getting by for, a very long time. And they tried all kinds of medications. They tried all kinds of treatments for me. Went so far as to have, neurosurgical releases, some of which were successful, some of which were not. I tried just about everything. And finally, my father is a neurologist, and he told me, he sat me down and he said, Ashley, why haven't you tried cannabis? The studies aren't just promising, the metadata is actually conclusive that it works for neuropathic pain. So you should try cannabis. And the truth is, I had never even thought about it. Again, I am a Southerner. It's not that I have anything against it. Don't care, frankly. I'm sort of a libertarian. Anything you do in private is your own business, as long as it's no harm to other people. So right. I didn't care whether other people did it or not, but I was one of those like, well, I don't take Advil for headaches. Why would I take weed for pain? Why would I engage in weed at all? Right. It's an illegal drug, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I, honestly, I was like, what have I got to lose? What have I got to lose? I've been dealing with this for over a decade, and, I have not had any real relief, and it's impacted my life so severely, that I, what have I got to lose? And so I tried it. And after 11 years, I was pain-free for the first time.
And it took you 11 years to get there. It wasn't one of those magical stories that you rubbed on some magic potion and the pain went away. There was
But it did. Yeah. I mean, that was what was magical about it. Like, right. I can dose once every 24 hours, and actually it gives me enough pain relieving benefit that it's been a complete game changer for me. It has made my life so much better.
Wow.
It was a very challenging time for me. And that's a very personal story. And it became very clear to me, yes, there's been a lot of awful propaganda against the use of this plant. It was completely dataless. Right. It was fear mongering. And, the good news is that we do have channels now to actually get that information out to people in a way that they can easily digest that, hey, and almost everybody that I know in the cannabis industry has some similar story, like they use it for post-traumatic stress disorder, or it doesn't work for me on that one, but honestly, just the ability to sleep again, right. For all of the other medications that I had been on, which all of them have side effects that are just really difficult to cope with, from gastrointestinal issues to exhaustion to insomnia. They take a real toll on your health. And actually, with cannabis, I was able to reduce some of those. I was able to come off some of them. Some of them I'll be on forever, and that's just kind of how that goes. But, I was able to even change regimens by using cannabis to help me with the withdrawal symptoms that you do have from regular medications.
Right.
These totally legal sources. And, Yes, I mean, of course, I was on opioids for a number of years there and took myself off of them because, frankly, they don't work for pain. They just knock you out.
Right. That's, a lot of people say that exact same thing, and I've heard that story, not specifically about that compartment pain that you've had to go through, but
Yeah.
whatever the ailment is, and they end up on opioids, and especially in the sports world, lots of athletes have gone through this, and that's why you're seeing a lot of athletes, ex-athletes, that are in the cannabis space because they recognize that this can help, and they'd much rather use THC-based plant material than take a Percocet or a Vicodin or whatever the team doctor wants them to take. Now, I do want to go back to Dr. Dad here, the neurologist, right? Because I want to make sure I heard this right. It was a medical doctor and also your father, a neurologist, and also your father who said, what the hell's the matter with my daughter? Why don't you take some weed to help with your pain? I think that's a great story. And by the way, very rare, as you know, in the medical community.
He's my father. He saw me struggling. He knew that this was something that could help. Now, it's true that the studies that were coming out at the time that he told me about it, and he was reading about them in his continuing medical education, and that's actually where he came up with the idea for it, because it's not the kind of thing that I think on the East Coast, the doctors have been conditioned to look for drug-seeking behavior in a way that makes them concerned about being able to provide this. But the other thing about it is actually the DEA threatens to take away, there is the underlying threat that they could take away your prescriber's license if you do recommend it. So if a patient comes to you and says, can I use cannabis for this? The doctors typically tell you yes, and actually it's a good idea, but they cannot tell you to use it. Now, my father, of course, is not my doctor.
Right.
Sometimes he thinks he is.
That's right.
But he had followed my condition, and, frankly, he had been instrumental to trying to get me adequate treatment, just seeing how impactful it had been on my life and how much it had altered the trajectory of my life. This happened when I was 23. I had to pay off medical debt before I could go to law school. This is, it's been very impactful. And, in some ways I'm grateful for it because I have a wonderful job and a wonderful opportunity to help the world in a way that is instrumental to making sure that legalization goes through and that people can have access to this. Because frankly, without financial infrastructure, no business is capable of surviving. No business.
Thank you for
those businesses. You're not going to get these medications. So.
Right. Thank you for reminding me about that too, by the way, because I certainly understand that. And, we too suffered the closing of a business account by a bank.
Sorry about that. It happens.
Well, no, it's so funny. I don't know if you're familiar with Kushko. Nick Kovacevic is the CEO of this company. It's a publicly traded company. And he and I did this interview, and it was a great interview. And it is available, by the way, on all the PCM social media outlets. But we talked about having the banks shut down your account. And of course, it happened to me once. It happened in Nick's company 6 times. And I said, oh, God, you make me feel so much better. But I felt like I broke my cannabis business cherry by having my bank shut me down, right? Because it's like, hey, you're a cannabis business. We can't do business with you. And off you go to the credit union world, which is where I am, and they offer plenty of services. And now that I know about Venmo for cannabis, this makes it so much better on so many fronts. I do want to go back to your 2 partners because I know there are other people on your team. Tell me a little bit about them and how you guys all came together to create this product.
Sure thing. So I'm going to start with Phil because he was the first addition to my team. He's our Chief Technology Officer.
He has a last name. What's it?
Laser.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I know that happens a lot because you're friend. You have that relationship.
That's exactly right. I'll be like, Phil, and they'll be like, Dr. Phil, and I'll be like, no.
Phil Glaze. I get it. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
And he's wonderful. He's a seasoned engineer. He was an old school IBMer, was doing contracts for the Department of Defense and the FBI during the 80s. And, he's an incredible technical talent. He he heads our technical team there. He designed systems for Bank of America and Wells Fargo. So like he knows how the banking systems, the internal IT infrastructure is set up. And then he's also, very passionate about fintech and about, moving things forward in terms of the infrastructure that is available to financial institutions, which is another place that I'm very passionate about as well. Because actually our infrastructure in the United States with respect to our financial infrastructure is obsolete. It is obsolete. I mean, you've seen the rest of the world actually already shift over to other systems, and the systems in the United States are still COBOL-based. And that's a type of coding language that actually isn't even taught anymore. It's not. And those engineers are retiring, so they have nobody to even service the systems that are like over 50 years old. That's an infrastructure that basically has a limited lifespan, wasn't really particularly scalable. I mean, at the time, of course, it felt very scalable because everything felt really cool, when we started doing infrastructural transaction systems. But now when you take a look at them, they're not forward looking. And, our team has been able to skate to where the puck's going to be in addition to backward integrating into US banking. So we have been very smart about the way that we have approached that. And actually, as a result of that, we are finalists for awards with Benzinga on their FinTech Award program.
Nice.
For best payments app and best use of blockchain.
Wow, there you go.
And we're not a cryptocurrency.
Not a cryptocurrency, that's good, and I appreciate that. But I do, look, first of all, you made a great sports analogy. Second of all, explain blockchain to those who may not be familiar with how it works.
Okay, so blockchain is a mechanism of transmitting data. So it's really a coding and encryption function. So blockchain is a wonderful technology for a lot of things, but in particular, when you start talking about tracking infrastructure, and what you're able to do with that is it's decentralized in some cases, it's not decentralized in others. So you can have it be, infinitely scalable through the decentralization process, or you can also keep it pretty tightly focused with a centralized process. And I'll explain a difference there. So for example, Bitcoin is decentralized in it's very concentrated. People who are familiar with cryptocurrencies will know what I'm talking about. But Bitcoin has, centralized processing, but it's still decentralized. Whereas, for example, Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a company that actually provides, ledger-based systems, but it's still encrypted in a way that is very, very difficult to break into. And it's impossible actually to change after the fact. So one of the things that's really nice about blockchain is that when you bring in the encryption and you bring in the no alterations post-transaction, if the data that is going into the system is taken directly from the source data, like for example, at the source of the transaction, like what we're doing, then basically you have a perfect record of what occurred. An immutable record. So like the days of cooking books are over kind of thing.
Well, that's good. And also, you mentioned about COBOL-based coding and how our systems are obsolete. I'm guessing that the cybersecurity has to be so intense that you feel very comfortable creating something like this, right? I mean,
we're a financial institution.
Yeah,
we're not skirting the rules on that either. Frankly, we have been SOC tested, penetration tested. We have policies for breaches. We are hoping that we never have them, but we go through high levels of encryption at any sort of place where we might have vulnerabilities. And that is not easy to do. We're doing our best, but we are trying to use financial institution level encryption and security processes, which are really required by law.
Right.
They're required. And it's something that, if you have any sort of a software-based system, you should be paying attention to your cybersecurity because everything can be hacked.
Right.
Everything can be.
And usually not by people from this country, I might add.
No. Well, infrequently. It happens, though. I mean, you take a look at the kid from Florida that ended up hacking everybody's Twitter accounts, like all of these famous people's Twitter accounts, and trying to get people to send him Bitcoin. I mean, like, that was kind of, it happens. That is my point. My point is that it happens even in this country. There's a lot of very talented folks out there who don't have enough to do, and so they mess around on computers and figure out ways to break into your systems. And they are very, very talented, unfortunately.
There you go.
So blockchain is a nice way to try to hedge against that. But I mean, the other thing about it that's really nice, because it's a record-keeping mechanism that basically makes it almost impossible to have corporate governance issues. And that's something that people should also pay attention to, because you want to know that the companies that you're working with are on the up and up, that they're operating legitimately, and that they're not doing anything that's going to make it so that whatever they're providing isn't sustainable. And frankly, you've got cannabis that's regulated, you've got finance that's regulated, so that's like a hyper level of regulation. Like it's a lot, and so you have to manage both sides of that. And encryption helps you make sure that everything is on the up and up. Blockchain encryption protects you. Blockchain, the way that coding is done, helps protect you against somebody, not fully disclosing everything.
Gotcha.
And it's encrypted, so you still have to have the keys to be able to get access to that data. Mm-hmm. It's not just like posted on the internet, but the fact is you can actually go back and review that, and nobody can change the records. So when you start talking about auditability, when you start talking about transparency, you can't do much better right now than blockchain-based systems. I mean, they're fantastic.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, I want to talk about my CEO.
That's the next one. I know. I knew who you had. Go ahead. Tell me about your CEO. What's his full name?
Stephen Gonzalez. And
okay.
He's absolutely brilliant. Just a wonderful guy. He's actually originally from the South Bronx projects. He's Nuyorican. He's Puerto Rican, from New York.
I know a few people from the South Bronx. What a shock, right? I mean, we all know people from the South Bronx. Go ahead. And there's some really cool people.
He's a wonderful person. He grew up in the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s. And, a lot of his people were running from the popo over possession charges, right. And, he saw a number of his neighbors actually go to prison for distribution of cannabis. And they're kids, they're young men, they're 14, 20, like these are kids, and their lives are being completely thrown away in that way. And so this is a very personal story for him as well. I'll let him tell you the full story another time, but frankly, he has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of this stuff. Like his community has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of the war on drugs, and frankly, the opportunity to take care of this and make sure that legalization went through. Because again, you don't get you're not going to get a hall pass for money laundering or financial fraud. That's it. Right. It goes to national security, so they can't do that. It's not like cannabis where you can get a state hall pass.
Right.
from the federal prohibition.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. These are genuine federal crimes that go to national security and go to protecting our country, to counter, basically trying to counteract terrorist financing. I mean, it's really important stuff. So you can't expect a hall pass on that. You won't get one.
Right.
But so he grew up in that environment, and he was really smart, was identified as a good candidate to get a minority scholarship to Exeter. And so it changed his life, and he went to Exeter, he went to Trinity College in Connecticut.
NESCAC, New England Small College Athletic Conference, Tufts University, my alma mater. I always give them a plug when I can. And Trinity's cool too. I played against Trinity. Oh my God. Anyway, keep going. It was a long freaking time ago. Okay.
Yeah. And he's got an MBA from USC. Again, he was part of, and I forget the name of the program, but it's another one that identifies minority talent, and actually had, he had scholarships the whole way. This is a guy with an incredible story, an incredible backstory, and has seen the upfront and personal he has seen the impact of the war on drugs. And, he's just a wonderful guy. Yeah. Just a really great guy and really smart. He did investment banking for a number of years. And after that, he became like the 8th employee, first adult in the room, chief operating officer, chief financial officer of this really cool, at the time, startup, Deviant Art, which is user generated content for example, comic book art. Yep. So how do you monetize comic book art? When you're an artist, you're a graphic artist, people are interested in your designs. This was one of the first marketplaces and one of the most well-known marketplaces to be able to pick up independent art from graphic artists. And for them to be able to monetize that and be able to actually sell that to the public. And so really, really fantastic organization. They were purchased by Wix.com a few years ago. And at that time, Steve started looking for a new project, got interested in this space. And actually, he and I met at a conference where I was speaking on the challenges of banking cannabis, on how to do it legally, and what you really needed to watch out for, because I'm very action oriented. I'm not going to give you the well, it depends answer. I'm going to give you this is the safest way to do this kind of answer. And I was working on my project, which was how do you bring the compliance and the transaction together, unify that so that it's not such a cost burden. He was working on the user interface side of the digital wallet to make it really, really attractive and very engaging for consumers, and something that could be a really a fun app for cannabis users to actually also generate content, be able to talk with one another about these things in a safe space that was not going to necessarily, it's artery pay, it's not cannabis pay, right. This is not going to out people, because people can be very private about their health issues. Right. I was actually, until I engaged in this project and realized that, I needed to actually be forthcoming about my own condition and things like that, and how this has helped me, because people just need to know. And so,
does that help you? I'm going to guess that has given you a center of confidence and a much more better feeling about just who you are and what you've gone through. You're more comfortable with it now, right?
Yes. I mean, actually talking about these things helps you go through them.
Yes, they do.
And it's hard because, yes, there's always going to be people who are going to judge you. That's going to happen. Yes. But you just kind of have to move past it and live your best life and be who you are. And frankly, I don't actually have anything to hide. I mean, other than the fact that I use cannabis for pain management, I'm so uninteresting.
No, I tell you what, you've been extremely interesting, and I've enjoyed chatting with you. How does it make money? Are you taking a percentage on every transaction? Is that how it's working?
This is free to the customer. So the customer is not being charged anything. It's just like Venmo in that way. For the merchants, yes, we are taking a percentage of the transaction, but we're using normal Square rates. Like we're not doing high risk rates. I have some opinions about high risk rates. I think that they actually incentivize people to hide what they're doing. And so we wanted to be, helpful and upfront and sustainable. And, these are small businesses. They're not able to afford 6 to 12% on the transaction processing fee. So we're looking at like a 2.9% and 30 cents, something like that, 3%, somewhere in that range.
Okay. And are we ready to go? Are you ready to bring this to market? Where are you in the stage of a startup world?
Yes. So actually our partnerships are in place. We are launching some pilot programs that are coming in Massachusetts with some of the dispensaries there. I cannot tell you exactly who they are right now, but there is one in the Rockwood area that we are talking with. There is one that has a store in Orange and a store in oh my goodness.
Well, we can do the math and do the...
I've forgotten the name of it, but it has a couple of stores. Yep. So you will be able to try out Artery Pay very soon. We believe that those programs are going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, probably before Thanksgiving. Also, if you guys want to come and talk to me, I'm actually going to be at the NCIA Cannabis thing that's going to be happening. They're doing a cyber summit. Right. I'm speaking on cannabis payments and banking. well, speaking, they recorded it. They recorded it a little bit early for me, so you'll see me be a little bit. This is funny. I'm a little bit less on point.
Okay.
I had one cup of coffee, but was also had not had my second, so it was a little bit early for me.
Now, you know that drug, caffeine, is a drug, and we're talking about a plant, right? And I always use that example when I talk to parents of kids, and they, cannabis, that's illegal. That you're going to end up going to different things, and you're going to be, homeless before you know it. And I'm like, it's a plant.
Well, I hope they recognize that I'm not homeless.
You're not homeless. And as a matter of fact, they're starting to realize there are actually a lot of very successful, smart people who have used it their whole lives to enhance their lives. It's about responsibility.
My people, but frankly, a lot of lawyers use cannabis. And frankly, the ones that use alcohol tend to lose their relationships. And the ones that use cannabis are actually able to be functioning human beings outside of work.
Wow, what a novel approach. I love that.
It's very funny. It's something that you encountered a lot. And it's a good thing. It's helpful, especially for people who need to, for example, for sleep.
Right.
I think
100%.
One of the big problems for, parents, for example, is that they don't get enough sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And when you do sleep, it's fitful, because there's noises going, and so you're always exhausted. And what's really fantastic to me is that indica strains can help you shut your brain off, and even short sleeps become more productive so that you wake up rested.
Right.
You wake up feeling better and ready to go the next day.
Yeah.
So I have found it to be incredibly helpful to interrupt that I'm worrying about not sleeping. Okay, I'm not sleeping, so I'm going to be in more pain tomorrow. Oh, now I've thought about my pain, so now I am in more pain because I'm not sleeping and I'm getting myself agitated. Yeah. So for me, I think that even just sleeping helps to interrupt that pain cycle,
right?
Which just spirals.
Right.
It just spirals.
And sleep, your body and your brain heal when it's relaxed and sleeping. So all that's cool. All right. Hey, look, we've got to wrap this up. Look, Ashley, you and I could probably talk for another hour. You know that, right? And we have one more cameo by your dog, perhaps. Is Kino there? Where is he? Keanu, where is he? Keanu, where is he? There he is. Okay. All right, so anyway, Ashley, the company is ArteryPay, arterypay.com. It's there. Yes. You can certainly see Ashley and her two partners there, and it explains what it's all about, and there is a contact button as well. But I just want to thank you again and wish you guys the best of luck. I expect we will be talking with you again. And also, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to my story too, because a lot of people like to tune that out sometimes, and I appreciate the fact that you're a good listener too. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your time, Jimmy. I really enjoyed it. This has been wonderful, and we're very excited to support In the Weeds, and really enjoyed being on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ashley Elsner from arterypay.com. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. I'm Jimmy Young from In the Weeds and the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.